We need to start.
Hey everybody, it's Richard Harris, Scott Leese, here with another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. Super excited. Thank you to Lead 411, our sponsor. If you're looking for intent data, better lead, direct dial numbers, cell phone numbers, based on job changes, and you want a slick plugin on Chrome and to use with LinkedIn, by all means, check out our sponsor, Lead 411. Without any further ado, we will introduce the author of The Transparency Sale, Todd Caponi. And I'm curious, before we do anything else, did it used to be Todd Capone and we had to change it? And are you tired of that joke?
No, not at all. Actually, my grandpa looked it up and found that he was actually born Caponi and he was the one that changed it. So yeah, I'm the original and I'm not related. So no need to try to shoot me through the car windows.
You are outside Chicago, right?
I am. I'm right outside Chicago, and there's a couple of restaurants around called Caponi still. So yeah,
it sounds questionable. It sounds questionable.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, like it's none of your business. How about that?
Yeah, that's the correct answer. Now, Todd, for anybody who's unfamiliar, can you give us just like the 1-minute pitch on what is the transparency sale? What is transparency selling all about?
Oh yeah, I kind of wind it into my background. We can answer two questions with one, if that helps.
Better.
Look at me, I'm being efficient. So my last role, I was the chief revenue officer of Chicago's Power Reviews. And so Power Reviews, you could probably guess, helps retailers and brands collect and display ratings and reviews. So you're buying a pair of shoes on Crocs, you look at the reviews, that was us helping with the collect and display. Essentially what happened was we did a research study with Northwestern University here in Chicago that was looking at, all right, when a website's acting as the salesperson, what does a consumer do? And what they found is, first of all, we all look at reviews, right? So no surprise there, 96% of us are looking at reviews and we're buying something we haven't bought before that's of medium to high consideration. But this literally changed my life. The study showed that most of us, 82% of us, go right to the negatives first when we're looking at reviews. So we skip the 5s and go right to the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s, exactly.
I don't want to waste my time on good stuff. I want to know what's bad.
Well, yeah, the perfect stuff is for marketing. The 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s are for me to try to predict what my experience is going to be like. And then when the review score on a product, and this is across all product categories, so it skews with some, but when the review score average is between a 4.2 and a 4.5, those products sell at the highest conversion. In other words, a 4.2 sells better than a 5. Imperfection sells better than perfection. Not having negative reviews is actually hurting you. So I look at that, and I'm a nerd, I'm a behavioral science nerd, so I start looking at, all right, that's when a website's acting as the salesperson. What happens in the human-to-human B2B world, and is the brain trying to do the same thing? And it turns out it is. That when we actually lead with the negatives, again, if 82% of us on our own are going to the negatives, if we can actually feed that to the buyer up front and say, hey, this is what you might not like, and if you're cool with that, you're going to love this. Magic happens. And so I had tried it out a couple of times. Sales cycles sped up dramatically. Win rates went up. We were working on the deals that we should be winning and losing the deals we're going to lose anyway faster. And I was like, I got to write about this. I quit my job. The CEO, I think, still wants to kill me for that. But it's been an incredible last couple of years on this journey. So, but that's it.
It's no coincidence then, Richard, you should know that the transparency sale on Amazon, I just looked it up. Its rating is a 4.5. Okay, so Todd
that was not on purpose. Although I will say
we rigged the system here.
I will say my
friends out there writing negative reviews.
My own freaking nephew gave me a 4. So, and like literally, I was pissed. Like I look and I'm like, Anton, you gave me a 4? And he's like, yeah, the book is great, but I know that all these 5s are killing you. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't work that way. Like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. But yeah, I've had a couple that have completely roasted me, which is quite an experice.
Yeah, I got my first like out of 1 or 2 star review the other day, and I was super taken aback. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I remembered Well, it's just like sales, Scott. Not everybody's going to say yes. Not everybody's going to like it. But my first instinct was like, oh my God, my feelings are like really hurt right now.
I think I'm going to go, and I'm going to go. We should totally start doing this, Scott. Is we should make everybody go to their Amazon, and they have to read their negative reviews out loud on the podcast.
Oh God.
We did that at Power Reviews for one of our sales kickoffs.
Yeah.
We had from our customers reading their own product negative reviews, the funniest ones. It was fantastic. That's a great idea, Richard. You got to do that.
This is like your version of celebrities,
Exactly.
Reading like all the negative
tweets
about them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You would like the one that roasted me was like, it was the audio book, and the person started with, "Free is too much for this garbage." And I was like, whew,
wow,
getting hot in here.
Well, this is why Todd's book is an international bestseller, Richard, because he's got 4.5, and my book doesn't sell for shit, and it's rated 4.9, right? That's why. This is the problem.
We've solved it. That's right.
Now, I want to ask you a really serious question for a second, because we just had Kyle Lacey on the other day on the show, and he did not mention the fact that he worked with you at Exact Target. So my question is this an indication that there was sales and marketing disalignment at Exact Target?
Not at all. We laughed together. We cried together. It was, Exact Target was the company that I was at before Power Reviews, and it was an incredible run. I got there when we were at about 100 million, joined the sales leadership team. And then we grew it up to, we IPO'd and then eventually sold it to Salesforce for a little under 3 billion. And the collaboration and the culture there was awesome. Like culture is so often talked about in a cliche, like, oh, we got to love each other. But they had actually branded the culture, this thing called Orange. Our management training was called Leading Orange. Everything was orange. But man, the relationship with, Kyle was on the content marketing team. And we were always working really, really closely together. It was a well-oiled machine that the results clearly indicate.
Just goes to show what can be done when there's a team full of superstars,
What are the things that your company did at Exact Target? Let's talk about culture since you brought it up. Mm-hmm. What are the things that people did? So obviously they gravitated around the concept.
Yeah.
But what were the things that you did physically partnering with to help foster that? Stronger than a belief system.
Exactly. It's, I've actually, again, being the behavioral science nerd, I've since studied it a little bit to see if I could really indicate what it is. And the first thing that I'll tell you is, and this is maybe a little controversial, but if you're using variable compensation as the means to motivate your sales reps, you're doing it wrong. Right?
Oh, you got to elaborate on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, the variable compensation should be the reward for doing something you're intrinsically motivated to do. And that's up to the leadership and the organizations to drive a culture that gets me up every morning and says, man, I'm going to run through a brick wall for this organization and make things happen. And then on the back end, I'm going to get variable compensation as my reward, right? So that element of pay and variable comp, in my estimation from the science, is that it really drives about 1/6 of what really drives engagement and kind of that connectedness and culture. And Exact Target did this so well. But the first 6 is this piece that I call feedback, which is status, recognition, validation, that understanding that every individual there is a human being. And one of the things that drives us is getting that status and recognition. So there were mechanisms in place to make sure that people were validated for the work they were doing and highly engaged from that perspective. The second F is what I call forecast, which is every morning when you wake up, you know what you're getting, right? And from the top down, every leader was consistent, helped you predict where the organization was going, and you felt like you knew what your role was in that organization. The third F is what I call freedom, which is autonomy, meaning you get the resources, the tools, the trust, and that permeated to the whole organization. So there was no micromanagement. The fourth one is function, meaning our mission, our purpose was to build a great technology organization and aid the future of one-to-one marketing. And we all felt like we were a part of that. And then the fifth one is family, meaning we felt like we were surrounded by people that cared about us. We had security, we had trust. And then of course, sixth one is fairness, which is the variable comp. So all of those elements together is what really drives engagement in any organization. And I would encourage companies to actually create a checklist and go, are we hitting all six of these? It's not just variable comp. Reps are not just coin operated. It plays a role, but you've got to balance out the other ones.
So what does comp look like, without giving away exact targets, comp plan?
In a Todd Caponi organization, what would comp look like?
Well, I think it needs to be consistent with, paying market rate. So in like when I was CRO, I literally just plucked the compensation plans from Exact Target and brought them to Power Review. So there was nothing magical about that. I just think that when we as leaders place too much emphasis on the comp in driving motivation, that's where we get it wrong. In a perfect, and I'll give you an example.
It's less about comp not being a motivating factor and more about, look, you've got to think about all of the other 9 million things other than just comp.
Exactly. Yeah, there's 5 other things. One example is I went to my CFO at Power Reviews and I had him bring back from the bank 10 $100 bills, right? And then we just did a little contest on the floor and said, hey, the next 10 reps to close a deal that's 12K ARR or more gets one of these $100 bills and we'll celebrate you and put you on the wall. These reps ran through a brick wall for these $100 bills when their commission on their deal would be
more than $100.
Well over, but it was that recognition and validation and celebration and family, right? And so like, those are the types of things that I look at and go, variable compensation is not driving the motivation. The motivation is these other elements. And if we put them all together the right way, we're going to create an environment where we want to stay, we want to run through a brick wall, and we want to tell all our friends, which is exactly what Exact Target did.
Now
So go ahead, Scott. Then
I have been asked within the last week twice what I think about quotas and how they pertain to commissions. And then I've seen some dialogue and some posts about killing off commissions and whatnot. Are you in favor of doing away with quota as it pertains to commissions, or do salespeople still need to have a quota?
So you may have noticed I was trolling both of your LinkedIn profiles before I joined this call.
I have not noticed yet.
Yes. And so I was just trying to get a little bit of a background, because in both of your cases, you've got an extensive sales leadership background, and then you both went independent. For me, in 2018, the book came out and I was like, book might suck, right? I've never written a book before. Actually, pretty good chance it would suck. It's done so much better than I ever would have imagined.
Exactly how I felt about my book.
Exactly. And so, but the first thing I did is I said, all right, how much cash runway do I have as an individual? How long can I do this? And then for me to continue to do it, how much revenue am I going to need on a quarterly basis to continue to keep the lights on? And that is my quota. Like, I work for myself, like this is the whole organization. And I have a quarterly quota that I develop at the beginning of the year that's based on what I need to achieve to make sure that I'm making the progress towards my end goal, which is creating a scalable business. And so for me, I am a diehard to quotas, right? Like, I just missed my first quota here the end of June. Got to 93%, which isn't terrible, but it was a bad quarter.
It's so funny that you mentioned that exact number, Todd, because I just mentioned last week on somebody else's show that if I did 93% to goal as a CRO, if I did that often enough, I'd probably end up losing my job. But if I do 93% to my own goal, I might be a little bit disappointed, but I'm still like, that's 93% to goal. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I felt. Like, yeah, I mean, if it becomes obviously quota is just one element of looking at your overall performance, right? Like, I'm an advocate for looking at ratios. Don't look at just piles of numbers, but look at the relationship between those, right? So how many qualified opportunities are you working on? How large is each one? What's your win rate on those? What's the cycle length on those? Looking at all 4 of those from a ratio perspective instead of just one bucket at a time. And your results are the output of those 4 anyway. And so that's the way I look at it. That quotas are, I mean, maybe, and I saw the post you're talking about, like I think I engaged on one. Maybe you change the word quota to target. Like if that makes everybody happy, cool, but you got to have something. Brian Tracy wrote the book Goals. And I just talked to another author who's writing a new book about all the behavioral science around why you have to have a target, why you have to have goals to achieve maximum success. So I don't see any science that tells us that we're doing a disservice by having quotas. And then variable compensation, I just think is part of the reward for doing what you're expected to do. And I'm still an advocate for that. I'm watching these posts with bated breath myself to see what the outcome is.
Yes, I'm in the same boat. I mean, my answer was pretty similar to yours, and this got asked on Thursday Night Sales the other day, and Justin Welsh had his quote was, "Anybody who doesn't like quotas is probably missing quotas," and things like that. So there's some pretty strong feelings on each camp, if you will. Yeah. So talk about the decision to go solo, if you will, right? I mean, we're all in the same boat on some level. We've all been operators multiple times, and then we've, various years now. Richard, I think, was the first one to go alone, then you, and I'm recent into it. Was it scary for you? Were you full of confidence? Did you have, runway to be comfortable for a significant amount of time? What has it been like?
Well, I think I may have done it first. I think, Richard, you and I are around the same age, but back in, so I'll give you a little backstory. Late 90s, I was with SAP. I did 800% of my target in 1999 and thought I was the greatest salesperson ever.
I think you're the greatest salesperson ever, 800% target. Either that or you had the worst goals set up of all time.
1999 at SAP was like working at a drive-through window. So like back then it was Y2K is coming. Everybody rushed to SAP, Oracle, and just buy stuff, right? And so I had a $3 million target. At the beginning of the year, I had about 2 million in pipeline, and I was like, I'm never going to make it. And I ended up over 24 million. It was freaking nuts. But 2000 came around, as we were kind of talking on the pre-show. I went running for the startup world, ran. The boat had already left, and I went right in the water, and realized really quickly that I was kind of a B- C+ sales rep, but my passion was always for leadership and teaching. And so in 2002, late 2002, I took everything I owned and bought a sales training franchise. And
now that's what I'm talking about. That is a serious leap of faith and commitment there in my mind.
Yeah. For me, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And after September 11th and the kind of the economy imploding right after that, there was this glut of middle-level managers, and I was never going to get there. I had no experience, and who's going to hire me for that? So I had to change the rules or change the game. And at the time, I felt like I had nothing to lose because I was kind of miserable. It was highly risky. I think year one in the franchise, I did about 16,000 in revenue. So it sucked. It was freaking horrible. But over the 3-year period, I got into, 100 different sales organizations. I learned how each one was run. I learned what was good, what was bad. I learned how do you create a foundational structure for how you scale growth. And when I popped out, a couple of years later, I joined a startup out of Pleasanton, another one, a company called Right Hemisphere. And soon into my tenure, I got promoted to be VP of worldwide sales because I think they said, he's cheap. And man, he knows about 10 times more than what we've got now. Let's go. And I was able to impart all of this stuff. And so the answer to your question is, in my career, I've done this a couple of times where I've taken a big leap and know that if I suck at it, the worst thing that could happen is I'm 50 times better on the back end. And in both cases, I needed to have a little bit of runway. That first time I literally sold everything I had. I was living in a crappy little place, just trying to get by. But I knew if I just do this for a couple of years, I'm going to be so much better than I was. And sure enough, that's what happened. And the same thing with this book. It's, I wrote it. If it sucked, I feel pretty confident in my skills that I could go get a job again. But I'm finding that I'm just having a blast spreading the good word and helping companies. So going to keep doing it.
Cool. What when you were you the competitive kid growing up? Were you always in sales? Were you hustling on the side, or did you have no desire? You had no thought about going into sales?
That's a really long answer. I think that first of all, my first sales job was in college. I went to Indiana University, and a woman came in and talked to our marketing team about an open role selling newspaper ads for the Indiana Daily Student newspaper. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. My dad was in sales. So my dad grew up in sales and was always in it, loved it. So I was like, you know what, that would be a fun experience. I'll go sell to the liquor stores and all of that around town and maybe get a discount or whatever. Well, I went and took that job, and that kind of catapulted me to it. When I got out of college, nobody interviewing for the sales jobs had any experience. And I had sold for 2 years newspaper ads. So that was like a huge leap. But to answer your question, like, was I always competitive? Not really. When I came across these transparency concepts and got to the point of writing the book, I've always been that guy that was kind of like, my CEO at Right Hemisphere in 2007 used to get mad at me because I wouldn't get mad at the reps. He never heard me raise my voice, never heard me yell, because I was just like, these are people like me. Like, and I was younger than all of them. When I came across these transparency concepts, I was like, all right, not only does transparency sell better than perfection, but the proliferation of reviews means we've got to do it anyway. Now is the time to start acting like human beings when we sell. Here's how you do it. And so I was really, really excited to write the book, because I'm tired of seeing sales at the bottom of the least trusted professions list that Gallup puts out every year. That transparency is my personality, and now I finally have the science and the data to back up why we all should be doing it. And this is kind of me.
So is that when you really fell in love with sales? Was sort of once you sort of grasped those concepts?
Yeah, I think that I fell in love with sales in my in that job, but my first 2 jobs out of college were nightmares. Like, I sold overnight shipping for Airborne Express, and it was 100 cold calls a day or you're fired. It was they gave me a company car, and they would just randomly come check it. And if you had a candy wrapper on the floor, they would dock your commissions. If you had a wire hanger instead of a wooden hanger for your suit, and like at the time I had no money, I had 3 suits that I bought at TJ Maxx that I just wore over and over and over again that were like threaded. And I freaking hated sales at the beginning. It was a nightmare. But once I realized that I had a passion for, the kind of the brain science, the decision science around it, and started studying that and going, all right, I think I can use this. I got better. And then it kind of led me to where I am now, which is, how do we take a bigger leap and get this out into the brains of the sales profession?
So what made you stick with it? Because I know a lot of people where, back in that time where it's like, yep, you had to wear the suit and you had to wear the tie, and, it's kind of ridiculous. I was in newspaper sales too. Why did you stick with it if you hated all those things?
I kept thinking that, well, I'll tell you 2 things. I left Airborne Express to come back to Chicago. So I did Airborne Express in Southern California. I came back to Chicago and joined a company called Computer Associates. And one of my buddies was there. And he was like, dude, it's fun. We'll just have a fun group and you'll make good money. And at the time, I was motivated by money, right? Like, I just was like, I'll just come in and do it. Now, CA was kind of rough, but I did 3.5 years there. But then I went to SAP. And like I said, SAP was like working at a drive-through window. And I made a ton of money and we had a blast. And that's what really solidified it for me. And yeah, kind of the rest is history, but you've got to be in the right environment, and those right environments exist. The old school cultures that used to be around, I mean, you probably remember some of these in the late 1990s. Man, those just don't exist anymore, and sales is a better place to be.
Talk about that. What were those old school cultures?
Oh, just the beatdown.
I still exist.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, there's still some old school methodologies out there that I see, and I'm sure you see too, that like we're still teaching people like it's 1982. But
like
yeah,
what? Which ones do you think are bad?
Oh, I'm not calling anybody out, brother.
Come on, man.
But I do, dude. You can't see it, but when I owned my sales training company from 2003 to 2006, I just this weekend was cleaning out the garage and found all the books that I had. Now,
I saw your picture of
yes.
that.
Yeah, and I had to know, I knew every word of those books, and I could teach every single one of them. And so, like, as I'm sitting there on Saturday, I'm leafing through it, I'm like, I can't believe I used to teach this crap. But it was the old school cold calling, like just beat them until they, like there was a lot of that kind of stuff where you got, I'll give you an example. The way we used to teach cold calling was that it's not your opening that matters. It's your response to their negative reaction to your cold call. And all of those fall into one of four categories, right? The customer is either all set, meaning they've got something already. They're not interested, which could be, we don't have the budget, I'm not the right person. They could say, hey, send me some information. Or they say, I'm too busy, like call me later. And so if you know that one of those four are coming, you should be able to conversationally and directly turn those around. So they say one, you turn it around. They say another, you turn it around. And you just do it until, like, I used to teach this crap. Like, that was kind of the old school methodology, that you would just do it until they like, I hate you, and they hang up. And that's no way to live. And like,
so what's new school?
Well, I think a lot of this stuff is new school, right? That when we look at the word empathy is overused in sales. Like, we keep hearing empathy, but I don't think we really understand what it is. I think if we have empathy for the way that human beings want to engage, want to prioritize, want to decide, and want to buy, then our role is to help them on that journey. That's why leading with transparency helps, right? Because our buyers are trying to make a decision, and we're only giving them one side of the story. Giving them both sides of the story is what a true salesperson is meant to be. Instead of being a necessary evil, we become an added value to the sales process. And it's things like that, right? It's aiding the buyer, being the Sherpa, being their personal trainer, and helping them not only see whether or not going with you is a good decision, but maybe helping them see that they can achieve more than they thought they could.
So let's just say you cold call me and I say, sorry, Todd, I'm not interested. Now what do you say?
Well, I wouldn't cold call you, Richard.
You know what I mean? I got to give people some tactics, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I think, so from a prospecting perspective.
He's saying he wouldn't call you. You wouldn't pick up the phone and call.
Right. So my tactics are, I believe that salespeople should be building relationships and not cold outreaching. Or if they are cold outreaching, the cold outreaches no longer include a sales pitch. And I know that's counterintuitive, but if you think about, as a CRO in my last role, I got 150 emails a day, and I was in 30 to 35 meetings per week. I checked my email because I had to. It's kind of like the instant lottery. Like, I got to scratch it off because there could be a winner in there, but odds are it's filled with losers, right? And so what stood out to me? Well, most of it was white noise. The emails that started with, I wanted to, or hey, I was just checking, or could I get 10 minutes on your calendar? The ones that stood out to me were the ones that were personalized and valuable in the first 10 words of the email, because every inbox that I have has got a preview, right? My Outlook, my phone, my Gmail, and sales reps are not using that. And so in a 2-week period, one company sent me an email saying, hey, Todd, I had just posted SDR roles on our website. 2 days later, they send me an email saying, Todd, here is a SDR salary survey of what SDRs in the Chicago market are making. And I looked at it, I opened it. I was like, hey, we just saw that you posted these roles, thought this could be helpful. I looked at it and I'm like, wow, this is helpful. This is great. 2 weeks later, quarter ends, they send me another email. Hey, Todd, here is a CRO board deck template that you could use to speed your prep for your board meeting. I open it up, next sentence, hey, you just ended your quarter, thought this could be helpful. I'm like, who are these guys? They could see that I was engaging, then they called. I could see on the caller ID it was them. I answered happily because they added value to me.
Now let me push you for more specificity here. I would venture to say that a lot of modern sellers understand this point that you're making, and probably even know now those are good ways to add value without an ask, right? I think now what people are trying to figure out is, what's the ratio? Like, do I need to have 2 or 3 emails where I add value like that before I ask for something? Is it 5 to 1? Is it 10 to 1? Or is it as many as it takes until the prospect asks you, hey, what do you do over there?
Well,
I'm still trying to understand those numbers. What do you teach people there?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about Richard's question about like what's a modern sales technique, right? I think about it from the empathetic perspective of you've got to put yourself truly in the shoes of the people that you're trying to buy or trying to sell to, right? And so for me, the way that we started teaching our sellers was to look at the tracking data. So if you send an email that's short, but it's got a link, and you start to see that that link's been open once, twice, 10 times, 20 times, call. Like now is the time. You've actually added value. And in some cases, maybe they've sent it around because they thought it was ridiculous, but that's rare. But I think you can sense that when somebody is engaging in your content, it's better to reach out to those people than it is to the ones that have no freaking clue who you are. Because for me, again, in my last role, I keep going back to that because I think it's important. My priorities were my team, my customers, my prospects. Number 14 on my priority list at work was unknown potential vendors. Like there's investors, there's my boss, there's partners, there's my, like all of those people. You're number 14. And when you start an email with, I wanted to, you're still number 14. You've got to earn the right to show me that you can help me with those top 3 priorities. And that's how you do it. Earn the right. That's perfect hashtag there, Richard. But that's, and like, Josh Brown talks about that. There's Josh Brown. A lot of people talk about this idea of you wouldn't go to a bank and make a withdrawal if you haven't made a deposit. And so I don't think there's a hard and fast ratio. It's just use some sense. Look at your tracking data and see that when they're engaging with it, reach out.
But so many people don't have this common sense or this intuition or the experience
I think their management, their leadership doesn't have the common sense. The leadership is pushing them to hit the number. It's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. And it's a thoughtful numbers game, right? It's a meaningful numbers game, not a numbers game. At least that's my opinion of it. So,
well, yeah, that's when I talked about earlier, the idea of ratios. One of the things that one of my managers, we had a rep that was incredible at getting meetings and getting deals into the pipeline. And everybody would look at him and go, dude, how are you doing this? You're amazing at that. Well, if you look at his back end results, they weren't so good. And it was because he was great at qualifying, but his win rates were bad. His deal sizes were bad. His cycle lengths were long. And so the modern sales leaders got to look at metrics as ratios and understand the full story. And if that's what we're just looking at, where we need hard and fast metrics around some of these things, I don't think there's any one size fit all. There certainly never was in my organizations. That we had to look at the whole story and all of these pieces together to be able to paint a good picture. Because like Richard, like how do you coach if that's all you're looking at and you don't really know the other elements? I think you really get stuck.
So do you feel like it's getting harder or easier to sell and to be a modern sales leader, as you said? If you and I and Richard were to go back into, VP of sales, CRO mode, do you think it'd be harder now than it was a few years ago, or do you think it's getting easier?
Well, I think it was getting easier up until, 4 months ago. I think we've got to understand that, consensus selling has always been hard, but consensus buying just got an awful lot harder. When buyers are all remote and we are all biased towards taking the shortest path to a reward, not necessarily take any path to a big reward, that we've got to optimize for the buying, the buying process and make sure we're optimizing for the way that buyers want to engage and decide. I think that part has gotten an awful lot harder in the short term.
I think it's gotten slower and probably a little bit tighter.
So what do you recommend to us, right? Like, so are we now going back to your point about, hey, you're number 14 on my list, and if you're not careful, you're going to be number 18. Right? As my uncle always says, there are 4 pages in the will, and it's my job to get off page 5. Right?
That is an awesome line. Holy cow!
When my kids were Cubs for T-ball the same year, I moved to page 1. So for a year. But so what do we do? What do we do now? Are we now having to send more of these, again, doubling down on that strategic approach, look at the things that the company's doing, acknowledging it, moving forward, and then try to, build that value Is that what you're still seeing work?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give one piece of advice that I think everybody should really look at. The one piece of good news in this uncertainty is that we can read the minds of buyers. And when I say that, I mean, in an up market, you could be thinking about all kinds of things like, hey, should we get a personal trainer? Hey, we need a new couch. We could upgrade the car. Well, all the discretionary stuff disappeared. And we all went to looking at our essentials and saying, how do we extend our runway of those and reduce our costs? And then let's look at worst case scenario. How do we protect against worst case scenario happening to us? So my point here is that the first piece of advice that I would tell everybody to do is go look at their messaging pre-pandemic, hit select all, delete, and then go into a room and figure out who are we now in July, August of 2020, and why should buyers care now? And rewrite those paragraphs. Like the first thing I did after crying in the fetal position in March when my whole calendar disappeared was I rewrote my website, and then I got on the phone with a couple of companies that were really struggling. One of which is in the office. It's office technology that zero people needed come March 15th, right? And they went from unfire to completely empty pipeline. And over a couple of days, they completely rewrote their website copy to be focused on what post-pandemic offices look like. And all of the pictures on their websites, people are wearing masks now, and it really speaks to somebody today versus 2019. And they're back up to 80% of where they were already. And so that's the advice. Look at your website and go, hey, if we wrote this in 2019, delete it and let's completely refresh it based on where we are today. And then make sure that all the reps are enabled to be delivering messages that are relevant in the summer of 2020 versus what an upmarket would look like.
I really love that, because there's been so much talk about how people and companies can kind of keep the culture and vibe that they had moving forward. And I keep saying, no, you're not going to keep it. You need to reinvent it. Yes. It has to become something completely different, probably. And you're talking about doing that in an even deeper, more powerful way than I was talking about it, which is you're talking about the actual messaging, the actual mechanism, the website that brings in attention and customers. So that's really good advice.
I've been saying all along that people had to go back and redo their product market fit in April. They've had to actually go back and do it again in July, because I think everybody was hoping somehow this thing was going to go away. And I think once a quarter, you're going to have to sort of go and redo this. And, come September, October, we're going to have to redo it. And then even come December and January. I mean, it's a constant product market fit adjustment, more so than any other time. And particularly if you've got, I can't even imagine if I'm a technology company, what my roadmap now looks like, because my roadmap completely shifted on what my priorities are of getting out. And so it's certainly an interesting business case study. Of course, I wish the world didn't have to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I literally, like all the programs, all the speaking that I do, I rewrote every paragraph. Like I just started over because the stuff I was talking about before, who cares? And I think every organization that's doing that is starting to see the fruits of that. And I'm amazed. I gave a talk to a leadership group in Indianapolis a few weeks ago, and they sent me the roster of attendees. It's all CEOs of mid-sized companies in Indianapolis of all industries. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed. I went into, I think it's archive.org, where you can see what their website looked like in 2019. And the percentage of companies that had changed any of their website copy was tiny, and they're all struggling right now. It's just like, hey, start there, and then go work with marketing and figure out who are we today, and why should companies care? And what the provocative line I often say is, messaging developed during an up market won't work in a down market. And I believe that to be mostly true with many organizations.
Yeah, I think so. I think your messaging when you're right after a breakup, when you try and date again, isn't going to work. So from when you were dating somebody,
that's right.
You got to change your messaging. So I want to ask you one totally bizarre question. How'd you get on the speaker circuit, right? How do you you have to go get an agent to be your speaker agent, or do you just like, there's like a website and you go plop your name in there, or like?
What is the speaker circuit?
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm working on it right now. The speaker circuit's weird. So the speaker circuit is essentially like all these companies around the world. They have conferences, they've got events, there's conventions, and then they just pick off people and, give you money to come talk, right? And this whole transparency concept is so relevant. And, and like the way I present, I think it's pretty entertaining. People seem to get an awful lot out of it. And so I just started with, I joined the National Speakers Association, first of all, and learned an awful lot there. But there's a couple of things. Number one is after the book came out, I hired a publicist for 3 months. I don't know if you did that, Scott, but it was just to have somebody that was out throwing my name into everything. And it gave me a lot of publicity. I don't know if it gave me an ROI. But then the second thing that I did is I hired a professional speaker coach. Now, I've always been pretty good on stage, but I'm an advocate for everybody that's listening, by the way. If you're good at something, get a coach and accelerate your lead, like extend your lead. It's like, every athlete, every professional that has a coach to make them better at what they do. Well, that's what I did. And it turns out that speaker coach is a leader at a massive speakers bureau. And so I had to go through this whole process of creating a media kit. And in the next week, I'm presenting to their board around what, basically all of their agents will get together and decide whether I'm a clown or not. But that's part of the process.
You tried to say the publicist may or may not brought ROI, but if it's led to all of these engagements, is it ROI, right?
Yeah, I think so. You're right. Yeah, I guess it has. It's there's never a direct line between publicity and ROI, but
interesting. Right. I know that Richard almost fell out of his chair when you asked me if I'd hired a publicist yet, because I spend no money.
Yeah.
Richard's probably dying. He's going like, you think I spent money on
to trim his beard.
I shave. I don't even shave or get a haircut hardly, so I don't spend money on razors, right, Richard?
Exactly.
That's awesome.
That's a good idea, though. I mean, I especially agree with the point about getting a professional speaking coach, right? I mean, look, no matter how many times all of us have gotten up in front of groups of a couple hundred inside your company or doing smaller kind of engagements, we could certainly get better. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever, I'm sure you have, as I have, but I've listened to myself back on tape a million times, and a million times I've been like, oh my God, what was I talking about? I sound horrible.
Yeah.
I exactly. Listen to myself a million times and complain about myself 2 million times.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we do, though. Like, if there's a group picture that you're in, what do? You look at it first and you're like, God, I look like a dope that day, right? Like, that's what we do. Yeah. And like, that's something that, I used to encourage all of the reps is if you can't record both sides of a cold call, at least record yourself and then ask yourself, would I want to continue talking to me? And I bet you most of the time the answer is no. Right. And so like, I think that's part of this with the speaker thing is I see myself on stage and I'm like, I think I could do better. Like the feedback's always been good, and this guy taught me so much to level up my game that I can't wait to get in front of.
Can you share one professional speaking tip that you learned from him that you can donate to us for free?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that he told me that I was not doing was lead with a story. Like you've got to engage people in the first 30 seconds with a story, not data. And for goodness sake, not a whole freaking bio about all the great things you've done. Like we are all have a tendency to go, oh, I was at Exec Target and Power Reviews and oh, aren't I awesome? Well, no, you build credibility through your stories and through the knowledge that you deliver, not through your background and experiences. So start with a story. And so I reordered and I saw immediate lift in engagement from leading with some kind of powerful story instead of leading with my bio.
That's really cool. I like that one. What when we're sort of getting to the end, as we always do on our podcast, we like to flip it around. How can we be of help to you? What can we do to help you?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that because you kind of teed me up for it. And I'm curious about your listeners too, but like you two specifically, you know, there's a whole community of individuals who have taken the leap like we have, right?
Yeah.
Where we've left the working world. And then as I was going through March when everything shut down, and like I said, you know, cried in the fetal position for a few hours and then kind of figured it out. April and May was great. June was terrible. July has been really good. August seems to be great. I would love to get together with a group of people that have taken this leap and learn lessons from one another, because there's technology we're using, there's approaches we're using, there's even just the kind of the camaraderie of what's going on and how do we go through this. And I have yet to find a good collection of individuals that will just get together on a regular basis. So,
well, we might be able to help you with that. There's a secret society, secret handshake. I'm kidding about all this, but we've had a couple conversations and Zooms with, you know, half dozen plus people who are in the same circuit, whatever you want to call it. And it's a really good idea. And what I've learned is how different everybody operates their business and how everybody's niche is actually quite different. When on the surface, people might lump us all into the same, you know, group, the same category.
We're all trainers, and we're not.
Exactly.
All these, you know, sales trainers, sales leaders, what have you. But no, it's like, you know, we do very different things and operate differently and spend differently, and our earnings are different and our goals to earn are very different. So I think that's a good idea, and we're probably overdue for another one of those.
We probably should do that.
And you know what? Can I just mention, you know, back to kind of wrapping that around a tip, is that in our industry, because everybody lumps us together, we're not doing a good job of differentiating what we do, right? And that's one of the things I'm having, like one-off conversations and trying to better define, like, what is it that I deliver that a potential customer for me will look at and go, I don't want Todd, I want Richard for this, but I don't want Richard for this, I want Todd for this. And I know clearly what they do. And I have not gotten to that point where I feel like I'm articulating that well. And I don't know if you guys have, but I'm sure somebody has.
I think I articulate it well now. I mean, the challenge is that we're just not household names, and I don't know that we ever are, right? Like, we're not Zoom.
Oh, you are, dude. Don't sell yourself short, Richard.
No.
You are.
As long as I am and Scott's not, then I'm okay. You know, but even still, like, and I've had the conversations like with John Barrows and stuff, and it's like, oh, John's the sales trainer. Just call John. He's worked with so and so and so and so and so and so. And I think to a large degree, that's about as good as I ever need to be. Because if I finally get, oh, I've seen you work with so and so and so and so, then I can go differentiate myself, or they can go to my website and see my differentiations. But even then, to your point, I think at least when I'm in competitive situations in sales, I know how to differentiate myself from everybody else. And that's so minutia oriented in a good way that it's hard to, how do you take that at a high level? And are people going to even believe it if they read it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I felt like when I went on the book writing journey, I learned so many things, but I felt alone through that whole process. I wrote a list of 70 meaty things that I learned on the book writing journey. So Richard, when you're ready, I will share those.
In the middle, I'm stuck right now. All
right. I'll send you the list. Hopefully that helps kind of shake you loose a little bit. But I feel the same way around building a true consulting, speaking, and training business, that I like every day it feels like I'm learning lessons on my own, that I know other people have advice, and I know there's things I'm doing that can help other people. And I've yet to see that avenue to make that come together.
Here's my give back. You should just turn that into an ebook. Hire somebody to make that an ebook for you of here's what I learned about writing my book. That's 70 tips, dude. I'd buy that.
Or better yet, Todd, organize all of us and be the union leader.
Absolutely.
You could be our Jimmy Hoffa, dude.
That's right.
Just don't disappear.
Exactly. I don't want to be buried in the end zone at New York Jet Stadium. So.
That's right.
All right. Hey, Todd, this has been fantastic, man. This is flown by. We totally appreciate all the insights and wisdom you've shared, and it's a real delight to get to know you and learn from you. So thank you for joining us.
I've had a blast, guys. That was so much fun, and it's so great to meet you. And hopefully sometime soon we can actually see each other in person instead of through the green dot on our laptop.
Yeah. Totally agree. And a quick shout out to our sponsor, Lead 411. If you're looking for lead intent data as well as direct dial phone numbers, you want a cool, slick Chrome extension plugin that pulls stuff off LinkedIn, please be sure to check out Lead 411. All right, man. Thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you, guys. That was awesome.